Today I'm going to talk about angles and parallel lines, and to do that I first of all need to have some parallel lines. So I've drawn some on here, and to indicate that they are parallel, I'm going to draw these arrows on to show that they are travelling in the same direction. If I want to look at angles on a parallel line, I need to have a second line, which we call a transversal line, which just cuts through all of the angles. What I'm going to do for this experiment, and if you want to do this at home as well, then feel free to pause the video now, draw out a system like this, and measure all the angles inside. So when I measure mine, I get 60 and 120, and on the top one, I get the same angles. And what we notice is that we actually get the same angles on this bottom section as we do on the top section, so we can sort of use this to try and deduce some rules that we would write down. To start off with though, I need to actually be able to indicate an angle, because if I say at the moment, look at angle 120, you'll be like, oh, is it this one up here, this one, or this one? We don't have a way of indicating that, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to label on top. I'm going to call this A. I don't want it in highlighter. I'm going to call this A. I'm going to call this B. I'm going to call this C and D. And then along my transversal line, I'm going to call these intersection points as well, certain things. So A, B, C, D, I'm going to go P, Q, R, and S, where Q and R indicate this intersection point here. Okay, so looking at this then, I want to look at a specific point. What I'm going to do is look at this 120. And if we look on the bottom side, I also have this 120. These angles are pointing in the same direction, and they are almost in corresponding positions where the top one, if I was to cover it up, would be in the same position as the bottom one. They're in the same actual position. So the way we'd say this is angle AQP, AQP, and they're equal to CRQ. And the reason for this is because they are corresponding angles. So we would know that corresponding angles are going to be equal. The next thing I want to bring your attention to is, let's go with this angle 120 here and this angle 60. Well, what's the relationship between these? In order to look at this one, I want us to really think about what way they are pointing and what they are actually doing. So we've got 120 here, we've got 60 here. They're both pointing sort of in the same direction, and they're both also, if we look at this, they're both also inside the line. So they're inside the lines together. So what we can say is that angle BQR added on to angle DRQ, and we can actually try and work out what they actually add up to. 120 and 60 is 180, and the way we can think about this is, well, 60 is going to be a corresponding angle with 60 at the top, BQP, and they're on a straight line, so therefore we could look at these two, which are going to be essentially on a straight line, which is 180. So what is the rule that we use for this? Well, if we think about this being like a house, where B, Q, R, and D is like a house, we call these co-interior, so they are interior to this house, and like an interior decorator decorates the inside of a house. These are co-interior angles. So if we get some sort of scenario where we don't cross any lines, they're inside, they're co-inhabited, we just call this co-interior angles. And there's one more rule I'd like to bring to your attention, and this is to do with, I'm just going to highlight over again, and I'm just going to use a different colour. I'm going to use pink this time, and I'm going to look at this 60 here, but I'm also going to look at this 60 here. Now, to think about this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw in their directions again. So this 60 is pointing outwards, this 60 is pointing in the alternate direction. So when we think about these, I'm first of all going to label what my coordinates are, what my angle is. So this bottom one is DRQ, angle DRQ, and that's going to be equal to angle RQA. And because they're equal, I want to think of a reason why. Well, their directions that they're going are in alternate directions. They're going in the opposite way to each other. So we would call these alternate angles. So this is an alternate angles. And they are the three rules that we use for angles and parallel lines. Quite often in a question you'd get 2 marks for these, one for actually correctly deducing what the angle would be, and one for stating a reason. So it's really important that in the exam you actually remember what these words mean. So corresponding, co-interior, and alternate. And remembering that corresponding and alternate are equal, and then co-interior will have a sum of 180 degrees. So thank you for watching. If you've got any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.